Hello, beautiful friends. This is part 2 of our goal-setting counterintuitive series. And this one is actually in regards to what Japanese cinema taught me about productivity. And it's not what you think. I know Japanese culture tends to be, especially corporate culture, working yourself to death. People have collapsed literally with, working themselves to death at their office and desk. Well, this is the exact opposite, and it's deeply rooted in a principle in Japanese culture that we're going to explore today. But before that, a quick book review. Recently, Cal Newport's Slow Productivity book has hit a lot of the YouTubers who are interested in this topic of slow productivity. And Cal Newport addresses this way. 1, focus on one thing instead of multitasking. Of course, women tend to be good at multitasking. So Newport says, focus on one thing, focus on a sustainable pace rather than racing, and kind of have a long-term goal in mind. Well, it has some good ideas, but we are going to dig much deeper today. And for that, I want to talk about not just slow productivity, but productivity by doing nothing, by allowing empty space, by allowing completely letting things go to kind of work underground for fertile new productivity. And by the way, just like if you plant a plant, you may plant the root or seed. If you keep digging it, the plant will never grow. By hands off, giving it some water, depending on what kind of plant it is, it will grow by itself. But in Japanese cinema in particular, in the 50s, there's a famous filmmaker, you may have heard of him, Yasushiro Ozu, O-Z-U. And he was known for a cinematic technique that was counter everything that Hollywood taught. And it was part and parcel of a culture he had grown up in. And that is to let the empty space breathe. For instance, he would set up the camera, and usually kind of as if someone was kneeling on the ground, like a Japanese person kneeling on the ground, being a participant in the room. And the camera would stay there in an empty space. And then some people would come in, maybe change their shoes or would have a conversation, and they leave. And the camera would just linger on the empty space. The exact opposite of Hollywood continuity editing, which edits quickly with the action. It's known as the pillow shot because the empty spaces that frame that shot, it's kind of like cushioning the action. In Hollywood and Western thinking in general, if it's empty, dead space, cutting floor, edit out, it's not needed. So why did Ozu defy all of these rules, expectations, and became hugely successful? Because in his universe, Ozu's universe, which again has been feeding off Japanese culture, centuries-old culture, the empty space is as meaningful as the space where the action is or the object is. And this is important for our lives nowadays and for our productivity. You may all have seen as children the drawing of two faces, profiles facing each other, and you see two profiles. But when you flip your imagination and look at the empty space in between the faces, a vase appears. See, once we become aware of the empty space, of the nothingness, the zero, new meaning emerges that stretches our previous thinking, thus stretches our productivity, because we see options and possibilities that we had not been aware of. In Japanese art, oftentimes the object is important, but sometimes almost of secondary importance to the empty space the object carves out. That is the true art, the empty space that is being carved out by the object. Again, a very different point of view of reality, challenging us to see things anew, but also there being meaning in the resting, not meaning in the doing. In Western culture, between 0 and 1, we focus on 1, the object, the thing, because 0 is, well, it's 0, it's nothing, let's cut it off and edit it out. But of course, we all know with physics, even this chair is primarily empty space. They're just small particles swirling at an incredibly high space, giving us the illusion of a solid object. But even the solid object is primarily, I'm not sure about the percentage, 90% or something like a crazy amount of empty space. And yet we discard the empty space. Computer science, of course, has figured it out, because computer science runs on 0 and 1. And if you just look at the 1, which we are attuned to in the West, looking at the object, looking at the action, looking at the next steps we have to take, with just 1, there would be no computer science and there would be no meaning, because the 1 only has meaning vis-a-vis the 0. So computer code is all zeros and ones. I'm not a computer scientist, but in that regard, meaning only occurs in the 1 and the 0. And so this video is to encourage you to lean into, to explore, to excavate the 0, the emptiness. Not just as, okay, I just rested and did nothing, so that is part of it, but as an active allowing yourself to feel into the empty spaces, to feel the portions that we usually disregard and often feel even guilty about. Have you heard of the power nap? Executives nowadays are being encouraged to take at least a 15-minute power nap throughout the day, because productivity skyrockets after there is a period of resting and letting things lay fallow. Even in agriculture, we know that if farmers overwork the field and produce the same crop year after year, instead of letting the earth and the soil lay fallow, it's a disaster for productivity. In fact, letting the soil lay fallow without working it, I think every 7 years, is of great importance. And even rotating the crop, I think every 2 years or every year, will allow far more productivity than otherwise. Top athletes. We've all heard that top athletes that imagine succeeding in their field of expertise can excel and surpass those who just physically train. But did you know that top athletes have to take off not just every few days, but actually there has to be a period of a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks that no training is being conducted at all. If you fail to do that, productivity or your excellence in your top performance will go down, not up. So I encourage you to look into what are the areas of letting things lay fallow, of letting things rest, of allowing yourself to lean into the empty spaces, to even be aware of the empty spaces and value it instead of feeling guilty about it. To let it breathe, let the empty space breathe and reveal the meaning to it. To look at the empty space rather than the object, because it reveals completely different realities to you that we have not been aware of, just like the example with the vase or the two profiles, depending if you look at the object or at the empty space between it, it reveals completely different realities. So you can see that we are far removed from Cal Newport's concept of slow productivity, focus on fewer things, allowing sustainability, and focus on quality over quantity, and focusing on quality over quantity. What we are talking about is way deeper and much more profound and much more exciting too, because this is not just focusing on one thing and slower work and quality over quantity. This is literally allowing new meaning to emerge and working with the emptiness, with the letting go, with feeling into that which is not there and allowing it to percolate and revealing its meaning for us. If you are stuck in any area or want more productivity, find or write down what are some of the things you haven't considered, the things you could let go of, the moments when you could just relax, not meditating, not visualization, not law of attraction, nor emptying your mind. See, as you know, I'm a Christian. I don't believe vacating your mind, as some meditation practices recommend, is a good idea. You don't leave your house alone and vacate it and something else enters it, some other kind of spirit entity, or however you may call it. So if you're a Christian, and even if you're not, I would not recommend emptying your brain, but just letting yourself, like you're floating in water, let's say. Hopefully you can swim. Otherwise, just laying down in the fresh air and relaxing instead of making to-do lists, tasks, check off, scheduling that tend to put you on this hamster wheel of going after the one thing, the object, the task, instead of allowing the zero, the emptiness, to emerge. So as many of you know, I've been working for many years as a professor of cinema studies, not making films, but studying film at UCLA and at Pepperdine in Malibu. And there are many filmmakers who allow their meaning to emerge through nothingness. One of the famous ones, of course, is Hitchcock. Hitchcock, the master of suspense, would purposely leave things out, leave things to the imagination of the viewer so as to create suspense, leave things unanswered, which is the suspense, the off the cliff, the cliffhanger, by alluding to something but then not giving you the answer until much later. For instance, it's often called, also in screenwriting, planned and payoff. You planned, let's say with Hitchcock, a knife in this drawer, but then you leave it, but audiences know, oh, this is going to be important, but we don't know how. So it leaves an empty space, an expectation, an anticipation or suspense. And much later, that knife comes into relevance in a scene later when we know, oh, it's there, will the murderer, whatever it is, or it's there, will it now play a role, since we know something that we have been let in on by the filmmaker, but haven't been given the answer. In another video, I want to go into the suspense much more deeply, because how can you use suspense in your business, in your branding? But so for your productivity, whether it's your personal productivity or for your business, allow the empty space. Also, for your brand, let's say you have clients, allow the clients empty space. Whether it's a physical space, let's say you have a beautiful store where people can come in, allow the space. And a lot of places know that if you place an object and leave a lot of empty space around it, it's much more desirable. Well, while this concept of the empty space, of the nothingness, of the zero is important for our personal development and productivity, you can also apply it to your business or brand. Let your audience, your clients, your customer experience the emptiness instead of overwhelming them with information or your products. We all know, for instance, if you walk into a beautiful, exquisite store, items for sale are placed in a display where there's a lot. Items that can be purchased are displayed in such a way that there's a lot of emptiness and space around it, because it becomes much more desirable. The same if you work with clients, whether you're a coach or other service provider, allow your clients this emptiness, the space in which to percolate and create new meaning and growth, because ultimately you want to facilitate growth in your customers. So the right time to give this empty space with purpose, and not to feel guilty give this empty space with purpose, rather than feeling guilty by constantly overwhelming them, is very conducive to growth in your clients and customers. Most people who purchase coaching programs never finish them. And I think one of the reasons is it's just a heap of information packed together, and there's no time to digest, to let it breathe, and so people give up. There's no reward in the letting go. And I think that's an important element you can incorporate or think about incorporating, whether you're a coach or whether you work with clients, customers, or have items for sale. Last example, though there are so many more, is a beautiful piece of artwork. Last example, though there are so many more, is if you have a beautiful piece of artwork. It gives a completely different impression if it takes up a lot of space on a huge wall in a modern house, compared to it's hung, that same piece of artwork, in a low-hanging room, closed in with other artwork. All of a sudden it loses its aura, it loses its exquisite. All of a sudden it loses its aura, it loses its exquisity, its luxury appeal. So to up-level in your personal life, to up-level your programs, to up-level your business, give space to both your clients as well as the program you create, as well as the objects you sell or have for sale, so as to work with the empty space rather than against the empty space. So write down at least 5 points where you can give yourself space, or your customers or clients space around your goal setting, where you've already want to achieve this or that. And then if you feel so called, do the goal setting, but of course you can also do the word of the year, which I've addressed in our previous video. And the word of the year really is conducive to allowing this breathing room, this empty space. But after you've defined your word of the year, write down 5 elements of giving your goals room to breathe: empty space, quietness, stillness, and watch your productivity soar. See you in the next video.